All right, you guys. So welcome back to the show. I have a good friend. I just made friends with him actually a few months ago. Very smart guy in the regenerative agricultural sector, Jason Rowntree. So I have him as a guest today. So welcome to the show, Jason.
Yeah. Hey, how are you doing?
Yep. So he has like a long resume. I'm gonna try to. I forgot you're like anti-social media now, right?
I have been for a while, but yeah.
Okay, I'll try. I'll see if maybe I can get a link or two and kind of link it into the description. If people want to find out more about you, they can kind of
Yeah,
go
no
about doing it
worries.
that way. But he has a long resume. I'm sure just describing his accomplishments will take about the first hour. So I'm going to pass on that one and just kind of
Mm.
dive into the subject. So how have you been doing today, Jason?
Oh, excellent. It's 63 degrees in Michigan. It's still March,
Oh,
and
nice and
although
hot over there. You
it's
know.
comparatively, it's my daughter, my wife and I are both from Texas. Like are you in San Antonio today?
Yeah, San Antonio today.
Yeah, so we're from Houston and East Texas, and my daughter walks in. She's like, "Can we turn the air on?" And my wife and I looked at each other and she just said, Michigander.
Yeah.
And just we're growing up in Texas. This is almost jacket weather, when it's 63. And then up here, it's like, can we turn the air on? It's hot. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah. Well, today I wanted to cover like sustainable agriculture and generally like
Great.
food quality in the U.S. So, it's becoming, I would say it's becoming like a little bit more popular to promote sustainable
Mm-hmm.
agriculture these days, but there's still kind of some ifs or buts about it in terms of the scalability and if like you could really, quote unquote, like feed the world or even just feed the country at that using sustainable methods. So let's kind of like first dive into that subject. Like, what's your take on
Great.
how realistic it is to feed 350 just million like US citizens? Let's just start with the US first before kind of trying to take on
Yeah.
world problems.
No, I think it's absolutely feasible. Um, I think there are challenges to, in these terms, really, Eugene, when we start talking about sustainable and regenerative and they can often mean so many different things to many people, right? And the way I try to contextualize this is what we're talking about is an agricultural approach that grows good, nutrient dense food and simultaneously is improving the environment with which the food is grown from. So it's this combination of, healthy soil, plants, animals, and people. And I don't believe that those principles and those approaches are dictated by size. There are multiple opportunities to scale these things up into the whole of agriculture. So I want to say that first, right? And simultaneously, I likewise, when we have these discussions, I never want to like blame a farmer for pointing out, well, if you grow regular corn or beans or wheat, that you're a part of this huge problem. And I think that rural America has been extracted from financially, educationally, health wise for a long period of time. I mean, you look at farm gate income, it's dramatically reduced over time. You look at increases of poverty indicators, school lunch programs in rural townships, rural school districts. Everything's going the wrong way. Okay. And so, what we're talking about are these really challenged positions of policy in the big corporatization of agriculture that can have positive and definitely negative influences. So I just want to qualify that, right? I'm not talking about blaming a farmer for the things that we bring up. It's a much more complex situation.
Mhm. Yeah. So, has anyone ever run or like done a mathematical model of how much like food, I guess in terms of regenerative practices, I guess maybe we can focus on like biodynamic farming or
Sure.
which other, can you kind of define, at least to the listener, the various
Yeah.
like
So let me like
regenerative
say
methods?
when I'm talking about, like the definition regenerative, right? It means that, basically we're taking the landscape and we are implementing principles that can improve that landscape ecologically while growing food on it. So it provides resilience. It can provide climate mitigation. The data is pretty scant, but just intuitively, it would also equate to better food, right? And more nutrient dense food. And you probably know more about a lot of that than I. And so instead of having these like airy conversations about regenerative or sustainable, I believe that we should be talking about principles, right? And I'm big on being led by principle and driven to outcome agriculturally. So what are the principles? Well, they're established soil health principles that are when we implement these and we stack them, we get good things ecologically. And they're very simple. It is minimizing disturbance in the land. And that can mean chemically, typically. It means using no-till, keeping your ground covered, right? Like using no-till agriculture, increasing biodiversity. That can be done through the implementation of cover crops, of improved perennialization in annual systems, or improved biodiversity in perennial systems. It means adding animals to the equation into our cropping systems, right? Adding livestock grazing into those systems. And finally, having context, right? Like having an understanding of what context is from a farmer's perspective, but also expanding those concentric circles out to the client, to the customer, to the consumer, to the health-minded, right? And so when I'm talking about agriculture in that space, I'm talking about being able to stack these principles on top of each other. And we know that this is doable. It's doable at scale, and the benefits are very positive. So when it goes back to the data, right? Like, we really, I always want to say models are, they're never right, but they can be useful. Data in, data out, and we're just kind of playing on a laptop. But most all this data is driven by models. Okay. So it's always, a function of the variables you add into these models. They can be highly empirical using just a few metrics, or they can be super complex. We like the super complex ones. But what I'll say is that there's never been anything I've seen done, and it's something on my list to like really take this stuff and expand it out. And the challenge is that, we all have a local context. How you ranch outside of San Antonio is a lot different from how I would do things up in central Michigan. So then trying to just like expand all of this across the nation to say, well, if we just do these things everywhere, life's going to be good. It's butterflies and rainbows. You can't do it very accurately, right? But what I can tell you is I've worked with ranchers and farmers globally, all throughout the United States, that are demonstrating this stuff. They're building improved ecological function and resilience to their landscapes. And most all would ascertain that the food likewise is becoming, greater and more nutrient dense at the same time.
Yeah. Well, can't for example, like you mentioned, just have like a set of principles, general principles that farmers can follow, and then kind of learn to scale that nationwide.
Yeah.
Sure. For sure. Like there's going to be climate differences, and soil.
Oh yeah.
But generally speaking, the principles will stay roughly the same no matter what.
Amen.
So
yeah, you nailed it. Because see, we tend to be we tend to be like just action oriented and output oriented, right? Where we take these very complex scenarios and we mash them up into a linear hard system, because humans are really good at linear hard systems. And like our computer, for instance, right? We tend to treat a complex natural system like it's linear and hard and complex. And so what we tend to do in agriculture is we tend to implement that linearization and that really hard system into these models. So we have these little check the box actions that you should do. And the problem is that an action in San Antonio is completely different from an action in Michigan. And the outcomes, the unintended consequences, the impacts locally have all these gradient and different effects. So to your point then, if we stay with the principles, we know these principles work everywhere. Like you can teach me the principles of human health, right? Like from a nutrition, physiology, mental health perspective. And regardless, sticking to those core principles, it's going to be different for every human, but generally speaking, those principles work. And so that's very much the same thing we try to do in agriculture. And I've done it at my place. I've got a 600-acre farm. Actually, I oversee two, but the one specifically is in Lake City, Michigan, 45th parallel, right south of Traverse City, right? And I inherited a farm that nothing wrong. Hey, look, we were doing all the best recommended practices, and we were haying and fertilizing and and trying to keep the pastures pretty and productive. And we're supplementing our cows considerable amounts. And, I came in and I quit it all like cold turkey. And what we did then is we took many of those same principles. We quit using fertilizers. We quit using herbicides. Now I do grow some annuals in these systems, like cool season annuals, which are turnips and radishes. And in order to get those established, I do have to use some technology, but I use very scant amounts once every 10 years in one spot. I also use very little fertilizer, just enough to get it going. And then I rely on the soil biology. I don't use enough to where it's going to stimmy my biology. But the point being is that spray or that fertilizer, that again is still an action, right? And in this case, I used a little of it, but it got me really big outcomes. But I'm not addicted to it. I don't need it. But the point is we took all of these things and stacked them. And I've been monitoring our soil carbon on this place for 10 plus years. And we've seen 3 metric ton per hectare per year sequestration annually on this place. Improved productivity, longer grazing into the season when we're profitable. And we've been able to measure all that stuff just by beginning to stack these things on top of each other. And it's no different in human health to your listeners, right? Like, you can work out and have a crap diet. You can have a good diet. You can have a good workout, but your sleep sucks. You can stack those things and then realize, oh, well, I'm unhappy or miserable at work. And unless you get them all stacked up and moving in the right direction, is only to that point where you're going to see these things really begin to, I think, get better. And so no different from us as humans. It's very much the same ecologically in a functioning ag landscape.
I know like a lot of tech people are looking for technology to capture like carbon. I think I saw like Elon Musk was trying to invest in something.
Oh, indeed.
How come they don't invest in regenerative farmers capturing all this carbon into the soil? It's already basically existing technology that's been around for like 5 billion years.
Well, dude, like, I have my background on some of this, and I worked a little bit with the Savory Institute, who's a good friends and colleagues. I helped them on their science. Alan Savory is the founder of Holistic Management. He's really, to me, like the early on thought leader in this space. He's the smartest guy I've ever met. And anyway, Savory was actually a finalist, like for the Virgin Earth Challenge with Richard Branson. So kind of that same deal, right? Like the guy in England, and he's always adventuring in. And when you think of like a billionaire, you think of Richard Branson, and they were a finalist actually. And I don't even know if they ever gave the award, Eugene, but the point is, it's just not sexy, right? Like it is to us, it's like groovy sexy, but it just wasn't this cool technology that, people want to see these neat things and they want to see these very linearized, easy to measure metrics. And we're in these complex natural systems. So you've got the variability piece in time and space. Land is variable. Carbon accrual is variable. It's driven by rainfall. It's driven by nitrogen. And typically what you see is most all of those folks key in on the technology side. I mean, if you look, I did the math a couple years ago, a year and a half ago. And so back to the Branson real quick. So, like I flew out to London and I was going to like meet with these people, and all probably good people. And, the Branson deal, and, we, had a good plan. We know the metrics well. We know this stuff works. And, dude, I got there and then they canceled the meeting on me. So like I flew all the way out to England, going to meet with the Branson crew. You know, I was like all pumped up, and they like shut me down, and even they canceled, and I never knew what happened on any of it. And it was anyway. I just took a train. Yeah, after the plane, I didn't have to pay for it, thankfully. But I just took a train and went and saw people I knew in North England, and went hung out up by Scotland, and it turned out to be a good vacation. But back to your point. So like when you think of ag, most people think of technology versus ecology. They think of precision farming, right? Like tractors and the right exact amount of chemicals put down on the root of a GMO plant that is going to save the damn world. Okay. And that's typically how people think, right? Bill Gates thinks that way, man. I've seen very little ecology in his spill. It's more technology. Not to say that he doesn't, that's just what I see. It's my opinion. So what it's going to take though, is it's going to take a lot of agroecology with proper technology, but technology that has to be in the proper context, right? Not a technology as a crutch, not technology as a savior. Technology is not going to save us. Trust me. So those are just kind of my own interpretations of the deal. But like, if you look at a 5,000 cow dairy, most dairies that provide the world cheese, milk, cream, powdered milk, you know, whatever, they're big. They're really big. So the term now for dairy is net zero dairy, right? We're going to have net zero carbon. And I've really tried to get my arms around that. And I think it's great. Hey, we're trying to reduce our emissions. But you look at those animals in the context of confinement, you've got these huge lagoons. They'll immediately think about, well, how do we capture all the manure and use it to energy, to offset the energy needs, right? So it's merely a technology problem for them. Where to me, I'm looking at it as like, well, how in the hell do I get these cows back on these pastures and get more diversity into that system to build soil carbon and water? And so the important thing is that technology can help, but it won't make agriculture more resilient. Only ecology, in my opinion, can make agriculture more resilient to climate.
Have you seen this funny YouTube video? It's called Cyberpunk Farm. It's like a Russian parody of like basically this Russian farmer. He has all this like fancy technology. I'll have to send it to you after you have
No, dude, I don't think I have, man, but no, I'd like to watch that one. Yeah, I do live on YouTube. I gave up like Facebook and Insta and all the Twitter, and I hung out on some of it to stock my kids, but hell, they're off too. And so I do like check out YouTube a lot, man. You don't need a college degree. You just need YouTube.
Yeah, pretty much. You can sit in on most lectures in Stanford these days on YouTube. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, what do you think? What do you think of? Well, first of all, like I remember I read a book a while ago. It's called like Teaming with Microbes. It's a popular book.
Yeah, I've read it. I know the authors.
Author, but he talked about like in terms of the Earth having basically looking at it as like an apple, and if you shaved off like 70% of it, that's the ocean, and then like 15% of it is like non-farmable land, and then basically you have like 15% or so that's farmable, but like a large portion of that, like metropolitan cities are built on fertile lands. So he's like, oh, you don't even have like that much farmable land available altogether. And I know regenerative farming takes more land in general. So what's your take on that obstacle?
First of all, I think we got to be like looking at it holistically. We produce enough calories or food today to feed 10 billion. We lose massive amounts of it in waste chains, and it isn't, properly recycled or whatever. But to your point, there's only so much land out there, and and we've degraded the hell out of it. We typically can point to a lot of data that suggests that we've degraded. We've lost over half the topsoil during the Green Revolution. A really recent paper, like published in Nature, not like a low end kind of gig, would say that in 30% of the land in the Midwest, they've lost all their topsoil. And so that's a bad deal, man. And so now I've done multiple equations. Okay. These are real world case studies looking at farmers that are producing in a regenerative framework. And typically it does take more land. And it's a few reasons. the comparisons need to be kept in context. For the first reason is that I've never met a regenerative farmer whose goal is to maximize output, right? Like everything's holistic. It's not about, and just like what I've learned from you, it's like, yeah, I mean, I could maximize my work, right? I could work every day, all day, 60, 80 hours. Or for my context,
you'll be like a real computer programmer. That's the
right.
big standard.
Dude, or I can work a few days a week intensively and hyper focused, but a few days a week and get damn near as much done. But the point is that the goal of the person in the regenerative space has never been to maximize an output, right? Like to how much yield per acre or crops per acre or pounds per carcass, right? It's more of that symbiosis of doing something, making it more profitable by having less inputs while making the landscapes more resilient, more biodiverse, whatever. So number one, the context in these two different types of agriculture is strictly different. Number two, in a normal commodity agriculture setting, we're using 150, 200 units of nitrogen to grow corn, for instance. That is coming from natural gas, right? It's typically a byproduct of natural gas. So we're dumping quite a bit of fossil fuel into a system to make it this productive. So it's kind of like in your space, it's like, comparing somebody that's completely natural to somebody that's just jacked up on anabolics. And you say, oh, well, we can't have the natural guy. We got to have, if we're going to save the world, we got to be jacked up, right? We got to be the anabolics. And they're not a fair comparison, right? And so agriculturally, it's the same way. So my assessment is that if we focus on the ecosystem processes of capturing energy, really trying to capture energy, improving our water cycles, enhancing biodiversity, and having a more functional mineral cycle that's really microbially processed. We do that under the auspices of those principles. We can grow as much food as we need on probably less land long term because it's going to be so much more productive and more diverse. And so I think that the problems is that we're humans and are like, we try to make these really complex things simple to make comparisons or to polarize, to make, let's put farming style A in against farming style B. And the point though is that I don't think we should worry about how much food we can produce. I think we need to worry about restoring the environments and doing that under that framework in that context. And I honestly think that production's not going to go away. I mean, the real things I get frightened about more, like when you go to Africa and you look at the international influence, for instance, China, they're all trying to turn into row crop ag everywhere, right? And so you have these hugely diverse landscapes that have a lot of carbon, and they're getting rampaged, man. They're desertifying. We're putting all that carbon back in the atmosphere, back in places that shouldn't be. Oceans are becoming more acidic because of it, all the things, whatever. So I think red herrings persist, man. So like when you talk about to the technology and the ecology approach, well, like when we do talk with the tech people, well, tell us about carbon permanence. How do we know it's going to be there forever? Tell us about carbon saturation. How do we know the soil is just going to quit absorbing carbon? And so there's always these red herrings that prevent you. Oh, well, Eugene, I'm going to be 190 pounds with 8% body fat. Well, how do I know then if I'm not going to blow my knee out because I've got so much mass? Well, let's freaking worry about getting to that point first. And instead, we just want to talk about the knee injury and not all the good benefits that become of it. And so it's red herrings, really, frankly, to permeate and persistently push memes that only lend to the status quo, in my opinion, right? That it only lends to doing the same old shit over and over again. And that's where we've got to break through and push forward.
I guess one problem with the tech sector is they typically don't attract the most health conscious individuals to begin with. So a lot of the concepts you might try to describe to them in terms of holistic health and actually improving the quality of your life might go completely over their head because they're not even thinking of that frequency as well.
Yeah.
And like, in my opinion, sick people can't make healthy decisions. or they wouldn't be sick to begin with, obviously, you know? So it's just
Yeah.
goes hand in hand.
And I think what I've learned from you, man, is like on some of this stuff is honestly, a lot of people don't even realize they're sick.
Yeah. The standards have
And you know,
definitely plummeted to like
it's normalized.
abysmal
Yeah.
minus category.
Yeah, dude. And then so what do? Let's take a pill, take 2 pills. And again, I don't want to like blame people, man, because we know a lot of these things are addictive, right? Like there's a lot of problems that are not that human being's fault, in my opinion. Genetics the epigenetic deal scares me, man. Like where, you know, if we're perfusing the uterus, not we, you and I, but if the XXs out there are eating and taking in all these things, and these things are perfusing the uterus, and very important, you know, genetic transcription and translation type events, the reprogramming is rampant. The research is getting more and more focused to that space, that the genes are being mutated, they're being altered. And then that leads to these generational genetic modifications that lend to greater unhealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we see it in animal models, and you know, it's not good, man. And then we just don't even know what normal is anymore.
Yeah. Well, a good example in terms of the animal models you mentioned. I know you know Frank Fitzpatrick. I volunteered on his.
Oh, indeed, yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I contacted, when I was writing my second book, I contacted so many ranchers, and most of them didn't even reply to me. But Frank was nice enough to actually reply to me like 5 months after I emailed him, you know, so he might be a little slow on the emails, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So he let me work on his ranch for quite a while and learn about
he's busy. Yeah.
Rotational grazing and
sure
100% grass-fed cattle, etc. And the thing like he did, which I found interesting, was he actually started his herd like, I don't know, 30 years ago. And basically he just said like, oh, he just let the cattle that weren't able to live on that land just kind of die off on their own.
Yeah.
And the cattle that were able to live on that land, they just obviously reproduced and created other cattle that are able to thrive on that land as well. So I mean, like the amount, I don't even know if he uses any medicines. He claimed he didn't use like any vaccines or medicines at all.
He probably didn't.
But just to show you, like, look, man, like that's how it's done through evolution. You know, that's how you create like a strong species.
Yeah.
That way. And it's funny, like a lot of times these days, especially in the health sector, I mean, so many people are like anti-GMO, like they try to do their best they can without eating like GMO food, and they buy the non-GMO Project Verified label and the USDA organic. But like using all these vaccines is also genetically modifying you as well, you know, where people completely overlook that part.
I put
obvious part, you know?
No, it makes sense, right? And we're not, you know, and for me, like on the GMO deal, I always put GMOs in a tool in the toolbox again, right? Like it can be used for good things. I think I don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? But it can also be used to spray more stuff, and we don't want to spray more stuff, or we don't want to, you know, manipulate things into our will genetically. That doesn't tend to do well, right? But back to Frank, yeah. So you know, that's called like the Lassiter approach, right? Where Tom Lassiter, you know, basically had these breeding principles for cattle where he basically, you know, selected and let the animals select themselves. Dominant bulls evolve in these lines that are more reproductively fit, so their fertility permeates generationally in the herd, where others that can't hang fall away, and just basically lets the cattle sort themselves out. It lends to greater longevity, higher fertility rates, and that's pretty arid country where he's at, right out of LA. Isn't he pretty is he high desert or?
No, he's like he's near Irvine, California. I don't know if you're familiar with that area. It's like Orange County.
Okay.
Yeah, he's like basically like a residential area. I mean,
wow. So he's like one of the last dudes hanging on kind of deal.
Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, he's like the only grass-fed supplier in like Orange County. So that's it.
So he's probably doing all right, huh?
Yeah, I know during the whole epidemic or pandemic thing when it first started in March, he sold off like all his meat like in a few weeks, you know?
So, oh yeah.
I'm like, man, Frank, you should just go into like war-torn countries and then sell meat there. You don't have any grocery stores to compete against.
Yeah. But you know, to your point about the ranchers, man, there are more and more of these guys that are getting this figured out, right? And ladies, I don't want to use the wrong pronoun or whatever there, but there's more humans, there's more people. By the way, most of the time, the lady ranchers I work with are a hell of a lot sharper than the men. They're more, they get livestock better and they understand it better.
Better tempers.
Yeah, they're more observant. But back there, there's more and more of these folks. Like I would recommend your listeners to check out like Understanding Ag, the Grass-Fed Exchange, the Savory Institute. I mean, this thing's getting bigger, and what I get excited about, like I worked with Savory on a program we call the Ecological Outcome Verification. And Savory actually, they have a label for food called Land to Market, right? But like the Epic products, I don't know if you ever see Epic products like out of Austin with
I eat their beef jerkies and stuff.
Yeah, so I met well, they sold it to General Mills, but Taylor and Katie and so what they were the drivers. They're awesome people, right? And we work and most of all this, really the intellectual leader of this is a guy named Pablo Borelli out in Argentina that we worked with, my colleague Matt Raven and I. But what we did is we actually went and kind of helped standardize this ecological verification program where we go out on acreage and we judge it for 16 metrics, indicators of those ecological processes, ecosystem processes I told you about: water, energy, mineral, community dynamics, whatever, biology. And we basically, created a scoring mechanism. Savory put their heart and soul into it. But now General Mills's products with Epic actually can sell food that has the label that says, hey, this food comes off an ecologically verified landscape. So some of General Mills stuff with Epic, and then Timberland has some boots, leather that's coming off that has that deal, and it's on about 2.2 million acres now. And I think it's going to continue those types of things. The beauty of that one is it's not a practice, it's an outcome. Organic is a practice, right? And there's some awesome organic farmers out there, but the crappiest, harshest, most beat to hell soils I've ever been on in my life were on organic greens farms in California. The tillage just absolutely destroys the soil aggregate. And so, that's some cool stuff, man. And, it's funny. The first time I met Taylor there, the guy that started Epic, we were at this black tie event in London. It's like a fundraiser. And it just turned out that we got paired up next to each other to sit. And he walks in, he has this awesome tuxedo on. He's wearing flip-flops. Mm-hmm. For me here, I got my boots on and all that. And I was like, where are you from, man? He's like, oh, I'm from Austin. I was like, no shit. This all makes sense. But anyway, it was kind of funny that he was from Austin. And I think actually at the end of the day, his luggage got lost in his shoes. He lost his shoes. But they've done some great stuff, right, on that ecology and food quality kind of lens. And that's really exciting to see them doing that stuff.
What do you feel like? How credible is the USDA organic certification these days, or has it been watered down like a bit too much?
Well, I think what's happened again is we've turned it into a verification system that should check the box. Now, like, you talk to the awesome farmers out there that back in the 70s, I don't know, 80s, were the proponents of organic. That was an ethos, right? Elliot Coleman, and the father of the hoop house gardening approach, right? He was hardcore organic, and that was an ethos. It was an ethic. It was like, we're going to grow shit right. We're going to do it right. We're going to grow awesome nutrient dense food. And then over time, it turns into this kind of check the box thing. Do we buy a lot of organic products? But the point is that, well, do you do X? Do you do Y? Check. Oh, well, here is an organically certified herbicide or an organically certified insecticide. Now, do we potentially need those? I'm not going to again throw a farmer under the bus because they got to save a crop. Okay. That's wrong. It's hard. Farming's hard, dude. And even vegetable farming's the worst, in my opinion. That's the hardest thing there is. And but at the end of the day, I don't see any improvements in water quality, water cycling, water quality, soil health, soil quality. Do we know if the food's any more nutrient dense? No. And, I go back to Dan Barber's book, Third Plate, which is a great book. I'm working a little bit with Dan right now, potentially on a project, and just met him though recently. And he's the chef at Stone Barns Rockefellers. And he tells a story in his book about the carrot. Have you ever read that book?
I actually know the history of the carrot, ironically.
The carrot, right? Yeah.
I read
and here's this
stuff.
organic carrot. Like they're looking at bricks, right? And so they're squeezing out carrot juice, looking at the soluble carbohydrates in the juice, which is the sugars. And, the farmer's just jumping up and down and saying, awesome. He's got this carrot that's got like the bricks of the juiciest, most sugar-laden grape ever. And then he grabs an organic carrot out of Mexico, and it has it doesn't have any, it's like zero, right? But it was organic. And so we conflate organic with nutrient density, and we can't do that.
Yeah, I guess it always comes down to farming practices of that exact farmer, and like how the crop is. Like, are you eating, first of all, like how good is the soil in that organic farm? And then B, are you eating it like right when you're picking it off the ground, or is it sitting in the supermarket for like 3 or 4 weeks before you eat it? All these like little variables have like a huge impact.
Yeah, was it like ozonated or and there are, I don't want to like poo-poo standards or verifications. I think we need them. I work with the American Grass-Fed Association, and I think they do a great job in terms of, putting realistic principles surrounding about what grass-fed should look like. We know there's some problems in the industry still, but it's getting better. And but again, like the thing I like about what we've helped create is it's outcome driven, right? It's not going to say you can't use A or B or C. We just want to come out every year and see if your land's getting better or not. And honestly, I think if your land's getting better, especially your water cycling, if that's getting better, then everything else lines out pretty good, in my opinion.
What's the deal with, I know like for some reason, like you can import beef carcasses from another country and still label it product of the USA, but you can't do that with pork products or poultry products. Like, why is it, do they change it just for beef, but not the other ones? It seems kind of like so sketchy when they do stuff like that,
Yeah, I can't speak to all the regulations. I can tell you that if a USDA inspected facility imports beef, they further process it in their own facility, it goes out stamped as a product of the US. Okay. I'm not as aware about the pork and poultry. But that's worth looking into. I know like there's, meat buyers that will something from like Australia is shipped to Mexico, and then it comes across the border from Mexico into the US, and then it's still processed in a facility. And the fact that it's been all over the world and around these deals, it still gets that. And I'm completely against it, man. And I don't, with blockchain, with DNA, with all these things coming about, I don't know how much longer the excuses can pile up of why we shouldn't be verifying where our food comes from. And it's no, I'm not being critical to the industry. Somebody's got to pay for it is a problem. And it just doesn't make sense to me that I can import lean Australian grass-fed. I can blend it with the fat from domestic killed grass-fed, the trim, blend it in a United States plant, and sell it as a product of the US. I'm not saying the action is wrong, right? I'm not saying it's wrong to import it. I'm not saying none of that is all the economic reasons I get, right? But I do think it's wrong. I believe it's misleading to consumers.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way, kind of like not super pro hydroponics, but I'm not like against it either. It's just kind of silly that like the US is the only country that allows hydroponics to be sold as organic without notifying the consumer it's grown hydroponically. Like no other country allows that to happen,
So, like, interesting story, man. We had this meeting up in the UP, and Elliot Coleman again was at this meeting. And here I am, like the grazer kind of redneck, and I'm sitting with like the king of of the Four Season Garden, Elliot Coleman, one of the guys that maybe really tried to help with the organic piece, right? And he was talking about that. He just came back from a meeting, right, where they were allowing hydroponic to be considered organic. And I mean, I can't tell you his language. I don't want to be too overly colorful for your listeners, right? But the point is like, if a bleeping hydroponic tomato that is not even grown in bleeping soil is considered organic, well then bleep organic. That's about where the premise is, right? Is that how can you, dude, it's all about the microbes, man. And it really is such a key driver in all of it. And if we function as we have, like they don't exist, and that we can just cook us up a little pot of stuff and put it in the plant. Am I enthralled with it? Hell yeah, dude. I look at those aquaponics setups and I'm like, shit, I want to do this in my backyard, man.
Because it is cool. Like
it is cool. And you go and you think about it from a food, like a resilience perspective, and you got solar panels running these pumps, and you can put up a hoop house in an area that's pretty cold and desolate globally. Man, it adds resilience to the system, right? So we don't want to throw it out. But again, is it potentially misleading to say that it has all these intrinsic values that you would assume a organic? And that's where I'm to the point, man, where like these labels, they mean less and less to me in so many ways, because I think that the key approach is that if you're like 100% gutturally committed, then you've got to know where you're buying your food from. You got to know your farmers. If you're like us and you're in a hurry a lot, you've kind of, I know what's right. You've kind of pushed me to do better. Thank you for that. But for us, it's like always an easy stop at Costco with a family of 5 and a hurried life, right? And to know it's a little better in certain regards. But I think that these terms of biodynamic or but basically farmers who farm by principles that improve ecological function, that it's hard to say, oh well, is it that much more nutrient dense, is it that much more biologically active, will it have that big of a impact on your health? I mean, it's all intuitive for me to say yes. Is all the data there to support it? That's hard, because like a diet is what we consume over a lifetime, right? And those genetic influences, right, the epigenetic influences, they all can influence our health. So we tend to look at these little windows. Well, if I eat grass-fed or I eat this whatever for 6 weeks, am I going to pee out more phenols than if I was eating grain-fed? Well, that's where the science is, man. And it's just really not attractive to do. And it's really doesn't address these deeper, more complex issues about nutritive value, secondary compounds, biologically active nutrients that are in food.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into the podcast. I'm curious, have you ever been confused by the labels in the grocery store? In Yevgeny's book, he demystifies the difference between caged, cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised meats. He also covers how to avoid GMOs, source high-quality water, fish, supplements, and other related topics. It's a beautifully illustrated, non-technical read that comes with a comprehensive video series and other extended learning materials. Jump on Amazon and check out the book titled Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide by Evgeny Trufkin. Now let's dive back into the podcast.
Well, I would have to say, like, in terms of the nutrient density, I mean, I remember reading Joel Salatin. He had the nutritional profile of his hens, the eggs, tested against a variety of factory farms.
Yeah.
I forgot exactly. It was in Oregon
right.
somewhere. And he showed like hundreds of percentage points more in various micronutrients. Like
A and E, a lot of fat solubles.
Yeah, I think it was like 900% more, like vitamin A or something like per egg.
Yeah. Right.
So those are.
No, I agree. We see it, like in my grass fed, I see it. I mean, we've got some data I think I've shared with you before. It's not published yet, but we always and routinely pick up considerably greater vitamin A, vitamin E, maybe zinc, nice, we've done last year, we did some killer good work. I mean, had really nice grass feds come off, very nice 6-to-3 ratios, but the cattle were still fat. Like, I think if we want omega-3s, then we have to have fat in the cattle. We can't, like, you can't promote leanness and omega-3s in the same sentence very well. And so you can do it. But again, it's like, it's very contextual, and you've got to know those things. And, the way we tend to do science is like, we kind of, okay, we're going to buy this labeled as regenerative at the grocery store, and this labeled as organic, and this is commodity, and we're going to feed it to people, and we're going to see what happens. And, all of the confounding issues with nutrition research evolve, like, all the bullshit we see with the epidemiological research in nutrition that's just grossly false, right? That, like, fat's killing us, carbs are going to say, whatever, right? And it just gets hard. But I think to your point, there's considerable evidence to support the theories of that, right? And I always hedge a bit on my, being an academic, right? We picked up in some work more recently considerably more polyphenols in our grass-fed work. But here's the gig, man. If it is about macro and micro, not even like secondary compounds, but macro and micro, you know what? I can probably create a diet and a feedlot to do anything I want it to do, right? Like, if I really hardcore wanted to match a grass-fed nutrient profile, I bet you I could do it. I've done it in certain regards. I can feed grapeseed extracts. We've worked on that, where it'll, like resveratrol, right? You think, grapes, and I can put it in there. I can feed it to them. And so, sorry, I can do those things. But again, is it the context, right? The soil health, all those things, just because there's maybe a nutrient in there, does that mean it's healthier? Or is there all this other stuff we don't even know that's going on, like in these bioactive compounds, these polyphenols, thousands and thousands of them that we don't even measure or really understand what they do, that we do know tend to compile in forages that are rich in these things. There can be a translative effect into the food products.
Yeah, I guess it's always important to remember that technology is always advancing. So you might not even have the technology to measure everything that's out there, or even like know what you don't know at this moment too. So it's kind of a little silly to just presume science knows everything and this is all there is to measure is what they're currently measuring. There's that.
No doubt.
Like huge. In regards to cattle, really quick, in terms of sustainability, I remember a friend told me, like, you'd need about like 100 to 120 pounds of grass to add like 1 pound of meat to the animal. Is that like, I forgot the exact numbers, honestly. We had a conversation a long time ago, but how many?
Okay, well, let's take it at weaning. You want to take it at weaning? So let's say I take a 6 weight. Okay. Now I'm going to start grazing season. All right. I need 6 months of grass, 30 pounds a day. All right. So that's 180 days. That's 30 pounds. That's 5,400 pounds of forage. All right. 5,400 pounds of forage. So then I'm going to take a 8 weight, like live weight. And let's say their carcass weight at 800 pounds is like, we'll just call it like 0.6. 0.55. I'm going to say that 8 weight hypothetically might have like a 440 pound carcass. All right. So let's say I'm going to grow that dude to 1,200 in that 180 days, which I do it. And I'm going to use 0.5. So now that's 660. So that's 220 pounds of red meat gain, carcass weight, right? 5,400 divided by, what did I say it was? 2.
I forgot.
Shit. I think the number is going to be closer to like 20.
So 20 pounds of grass for 1 pound of weight gain?
Yeah, 440 to 660. What's 660 minus 440. That was what it was. 220 is the red meat gain. 5,400 pounds of grass to get there. 24.5 is what my calculator says.
Oh, okay.
So that's just some weaning to slaughter. Does it incorporate the cow? Does it incorporate what I fed them through the winter? No. But 120 seems like a considerably high number.
High number. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Maybe I misheard something or something of that sort.
No worries. But that's, yeah, we do it for a living. I feel pretty confident I do know that. I don't know about as much about bioactive transfer of nutrients and all that, but I feel pretty decent about my grass-fed knowledge.
I take it like probably you'd need a lot less pounds of grain to add that kind of per pound weight, right?
You do. It's generally the footprints are 30 to 40% less. Yeah, it's so honestly, right? Like you can see in really high-end forages, you can get the overall energy in those forages within 15% of corn. The thing is that corn just like, it just melts like a lollipop in the rumen of a cow, where a lot of that energy is tied up as fiber in the rumen. So that fiber is really made up of it's cellulose. It's made up of glucose molecules. But ultimately, we know through the microbial fermentation process, it requires the microbes to break it down. There's a lot of energy that's expelled in the process of breaking it down. We know, for instance, methane, which isn't killing us, by the way, methane would be a gas that is emitted through that process. So typically there's greater energy loss, right? So normally when we do our calculations, we calculate about like a 3.5% gross energy loss in a feedlot and like a 7% loss of total energy in a grass diet. So there's some confounding factors because of digestion that makes corn more nutrient dense. Now, if you factor in all the stuff that went into the corn and the fact that I can grow grass with photosynthesis, which is for free, right? It can really change the overall energy values. But again, it does require greater landscapes to do it.
Gotcha. Well, have any regenerative farmers like incorporated hydroponics into enhancing the regeneration of the soil, or is that, do you feel like sometimes you can just do a few hydroponics here and there to give the soil rest? Or is that
so when you mean by that, you're basically allowing land to recover and you're growing things in a greenhouse using hydroponic technologies?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm not sure. And again, these are all potential tools in the toolbox to add resilience, right? It's not like I'd much rather eat a hydroponic tomato than a can of Chef Boyardee. So it's like, we need to kind of prioritize health, right? And so, but like I would love somebody to do that, because in that way, it's like, we're not like, I get a little frustrated in a way where you got like the religious zealots of this stuff that it's just such and I love them, don't get me wrong, but dude, like I'm pretty pragmatic and practical on this stuff, and you got to pay bills and you got to make income and you got to do things that work for you, right? And so if somebody was doing that combined with some other technologies to make things go, I think that would be awesome. Personally, I think it allows you to be more risk averse. There's a lot of potential opportunities there. And I'm not a purist in any form, man. I'm just to try to be as real. Like when you see the global devastation, I know you travel a lot. I told my wife, if I ever write a book, it's going to be everywhere I go is effed up. And it's because all the landscape sucks, man. It's just so true. It's so degraded everywhere. Like Africa, oh my God. I mean, now New Zealand's pretty nice, but they use a shit ton of fertilizer still there. They use like 300 units per acre. But the point being is that like, it's like we can make so much easy change in our systems right now without having these like polar, what is sustainable? What is regenerative? What is this? What is that? Man, it's like, dude, we have so much easy stuff we can do. We shouldn't be even worried about those conversations right now.
Gotcha. Well, first of all, like in regards to getting beef from like someplace like Australia, for example, do you feel their grass-fed beef is like credible? Because they don't
Yeah.
have subsidies. So I think like as long as
No,
you don't get
most of those
chased
landscapes
for
are,
random meat
you travel that country. I didn't mean to cut you off. It kind of lagged. I'm sorry. It no, I trust it. Because they're gonna do so. See, like in the US, in a lot of our areas, land is a rate limiter, right? You're in Irvine, California, and land is a hell of a rate limiter for where you raise food. You talked about it earlier, where your cities are. Land is a big rate limiter here. Land constrains our ability to do things, the availability and amount of it. Australia, it's large, it's expansive, pretty largely degraded. One of the best books you'll ever read is that Call of the Reed Warbler. I don't know if you've seen that one, about Australia holistic management. Great book, Call of the Reed Warbler. But their grass-fed is going to be pretty much grass-fed. Mm-hmm. Now, you're not going to get quality grass-fed from Australia. You aren't going to get, like I shoot for the fact that when I raise cattle, like our cattle average high select generally. Now I can get cattle up in the choice grade on grass. I can do it every year. I know people that can get them prime. I can get them high choice. I've used some like Wagyu or Akaushi type genetics. Actually, the Akaushi Association they're like right out of Lockhart, Texas. They're not horribly far from you. We've grass finished with them. I can do it. But if you want like that marbled steak, it's not going to be from Australia.
What do you feel is that's what I always wondered, because sometimes I see Australian ground beef, for example, sold for like almost $6 or $7 a pound at stores, grass fed. I'm like, man, how? Because the cost of living in Australia is still like pretty high. I'm like, how the hell did they get it down so cheap like that? They must be.
Their costs are Zippo compared to ours.
Oh, really?
It's cheaper to raise sheep. Like I live in mid-Michigan. The largest sheep packing facility in the nation is in Detroit. It's cheaper for our main grocery stores to ship lamb from Australia and New Zealand here than it is to buy from the local packing facility. That's the largest lamb killing facility in the nation, or was. Maybe it is anymore. And their costs of production are so considerably lower because they have more land. They can be more extensive. Takes longer, but they don't have any money in them, right? They don't have all these supplements. They don't have all these things because they're not confounded by land or constrained by land. They can put it on a boat, send it here. If it's beef, they can put it in a bag, wet age it, let it wet age all the way here. You've got a ready to market product right when you get it here that's been aged. Not a bad product necessarily, but like, and so I don't know, man, like I've never like 100% convinced myself that marbling is like the end all be all for flavor anyway. Like I go back and forth, man, because to me, like a lot of the grass that I have is super tender, but not as potentially marbled often enough. Has a great flavor profile though. Great flavor profile, so I don't know. I'm still like, I'm kind of a beef eater period, I guess, but.
Well, what makes the beef like lower quality from Australia? I do have some clients ask me like from time to time.
Energy. It's energy. Yeah. So marbling is a function of energy.
I see. Okay.
So what Australia might do is they may use more continental beef genetics, right? Like leaner, more muscular genetics that produce a very lean carcass that has a high cutability. But they're not the type of genetics typically that are used to marble heavy. The only way those genetics will marble heavy is if you put tons of energy in terms of very digestible grains in front of them. So honestly, what's typically happening is because they're probably getting paid on some level of yield, they're using these genetics that aren't going to marble, and then they're not getting enough energy in them to reach their potential for marbling. So they're getting paid not on marbling, but on yield, lean yield. So they're going to emphasize that. Generally, a lot of those environments probably aren't going to have the nutrient density, the overall forage availability and energy that you'll see in temperate areas in the United States, New Zealand, Argentina, elsewhere. And so it's just a function of them not getting enough overall energy to put fat in the adipocyte or the intramuscular deposition of the lean of the muscle.
Gotcha. Well, just like a few more topics here. What's your take on, I guess, the tech community in particular, like Bill Gates promoting like fake meat?
Yeah. So it pisses me off. I'm joking, dude. I'm not on the clock right now, MSU, but no, look, I look again, qualification. If somebody wants to eat beyond or impossible, I am not going to be one to hold them up. They feel that they're vegan. I have tons of friends that are vegans. I never want to judge them or make them feel like less than, I want to value them regardless, right? It isn't I don't really, I don't judge people on what they eat. Okay. But to say that there's suddenly something novel about a soybean burger, okay, environmentally is just, in my opinion, it's wrong. It's not accurate. If you look at the overall footprinting and the ecological things out there, this premise that like plant-based protein burgers are going to be this huge environmental savior, it's just the data, in my opinion, doesn't support it. We all know there's tons of stuff in them. I'm not going to go down that road. So I think Bill Gates is well-intentioned, but I just have to disagree with his opinions. And I think he carries a lot of weight, right? And it kind of frustrates me where he's probably simultaneously investing in some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Also simultaneously saying that this is the deal, right? Where, look, man, in the US, if you just want to get down to the nitty-gritty, in the US, agriculture makes up 9% of our emissions. Agriculture makes up 9%. Of that 9%, 60% of it's animal emissions, or 5.4. Of that 5.4, 60% of it is cattle methane, right? So that comes to 3.5% of the emissions, right, are due to animal ag. So, we've done the math, right? You can manipulate it however you want. If you look at a regenerative beef system, compare it to a commodity crop system, from an ecological and an environmental benefit perspective, it's a slam dunk. The regenerative grazing model is going to kill it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, beef's bad now, so let's just completely throw beef under the bus. Methane is another complete red herring, in my opinion. Methane is a biogenic. I don't want to go into it. It's getting late. But methane, the data would suggest that methane is a short-flowed greenhouse gas. It's in our atmosphere 10 to 12 years. It does have a higher global warming potential. It has more opportunity to trap heat. Very, very minimal global temperature potential. It doesn't influence increases in temperature very much. We tend to treat methane like the same way CO2, where it's in the atmosphere 1,000 years. Methane is degraded in the environment by OHs, which come from water. Those OHs break down methane into CO2 and more water, which is then recycled through photosynthesis and rain events for plant growth. Methane has been here for hundreds of millions of years and is part of a natural biogenic cycle. What now happens is that we conflate that methane with methane coming from other industries that are taking up deep, deep methane from the ground, putting them up in the atmosphere, which has created an imbalance. Okay. So that's where a lot of that comes from. Often our models are 30% less enteric methane than what the textbook models say they should be. And I just feel like it has been shaped into a ploy that certain movements use that as a crutch to get rid of cattle because maybe of animal welfare or more ethical, their own ethics, right? So where I agree with Bill Gates, though, I will say this, is he did the math. I did the math a year and a half ago and basically said, well, if you're going to value carbon, I'd have it at 400 a ton. And the reason I say that is at the time, oil was like 65 bucks a barrel. It takes about 7 barrels of oil to make a ton of carbon, 400 bucks roughly. I think carbon should be valued at 400, not at 15. Bill Gates came out in his latest report and said his estimated cost for carbon would be around 400 a ton. That's probably through a technological way. We arrived at it differently, but so I shouldn't say it pisses me off. It just like frustrates me because it just doesn't come from a grounded base of knowledge to make these claims. I'm helping some folks on lab-based stuff. If they can find a way to make, hydroponic meat, right? I'm not going to throw them under the bus. Hell, I mean, I think it's worth looking at. I mean, I'm not, what happens when we got to move to Mars, man? We're going to have to do it somehow. And so, I'm never opposed to people that want to do things differently. And so I'm helping people that are doing lab meat, providing genetic stuff for them or whatever, just to see, hey, can you do this? Is it really better for the environment? Maybe. I don't think it is, but I'm not opposed to helping.
Yeah, I guess it's important to remember that, like, what's the number one detriment in terms of agriculture to the climate or the soil? It's like monocropping mainly, and like what are all these like soys, grains, lentils, beans? How are they all grown? They're grown in monocropping systems, and so there's that common sense aspect to kind of.
It is, we want to farm in nature's image as much as possible, which biodiversity is a big driver of it.
Yeah. Well, let me see. I'm trying to look at my questions here. I think we covered pretty much everything. I had one important question to ask you. Oh yeah, last question. What do you think? I mean, is it reasonable to, like, for my calculations, if like the U.S. just brought back their bison herds that they had in the 1800s?
Yeah.
Even if they kind of just harvested like a decent portion of them every single year, would provide every American, with 350 million Americans, with about 50 to 57 pounds of very high quality bison every single year.
Yeah, I don't know the math, but I do know that generally the estimates pre-settlement would be about anywhere from 80 to 90 up to 120 million head of bison in the Great Plains of North America, which, today we have about 35 million cattle on feed, somewhere in there probably. But then we got that, we got, I don't know how many cows we got. I forget the numbers, maybe 50, 60, somewhere in there. So, comparable. It's important to understand that 95% plus of the bison finished in the United States are finished on grain. Mm. And that's an important piece, right? That we tend to think we're purchasing, free range, whatever bison, and often they're finished on grain. But no, I think, I thought about it last night. I'm reading a book called Land by Simon Winchester. Great book, but it's about the history of land and how it went from nothing to the commons. Like the commons ran the land. And you heard that term, like tragedy of the commons. It's a tragedy of the commons. That's when land shifted from being run by the commons agriculturally for food in a communal based system to people buying it and dividing it and stealing a lot of it, right? And interestingly enough, there's a chapter last night on Ted Turner. And so, Ted Turner, now he's top 3 landowner in the U.S. I don't know where he's at anymore, but obviously a very big proponent of rewilding through bison. And, I think it's these people that have owned these millions of acres of tracts of land, I think it's an excellent idea to try to mimic it, right? You read back kind of more on your side of the world, in Europe, when you get it, not you're from Ukraine, right? But further up, when they talk about reintroducing the mastodons and reintroducing these primitive beasts, that the megafauna that drove all the carbon uptake is a potential way to offset all of the carbon that's being emitted and methane that's being emitted, going back to these natural images. So I'm all for it, man. I think that the fact that we've lost the massive animal impact throughout the Great Plains, through division, through plowing for ethanol to whatever, has led to these massive cedar invasions. We have considerably erratic fire now. The fires that used to be consuming more consistent over long periods of time, or people don't want to burn, or ask California how that's working, kind of a gig, right? So no, I think there's a lot of merit to it. I think to do it right, I mean, I think the benefits of the landscapes would be massive. There's a rancher in South Dakota. Her name is Mimi Hildenbrand, that is doing an amazing job. I mean, there's published research on her ranch of the positive jobs she's doing. She practices holistic management using bison, and there's a lot of opportunity there, in my opinion.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Or do you have any other closing statements that you want to cover?
No, I just have enjoyed getting to know you over the last couple of months, and your our relationship is one I value, and if I can help, any of your folks, might have a food question or whatever, feel free to shoot it my way, and enjoy these conversations, man.
Cool. Well, thanks for being a guest, Jason.
All right, dude.
I'll send you that link on YouTube with the cyberpunk farmer from Russia. You're gonna laugh. It's pretty funny.
Sounds good, man.
Okay. All right, guys.
Cool.
Have a good one.
Thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you've ever had trouble losing weight, or you've lost weight, but still didn't have the ideal body or health you're aiming for, please feel free to reach out anytime and book an assessment. Eugene will work with you to cover your goals in detail, see what's holding you back, and go from there. In the meantime, feel free to check out the countless testimonials on Eugene's website in the link below. In the testimonial section, you'll notice everyone has various backgrounds, are of all different ages, and all have had different challenges in their life, but they all have one thing in common: they were all able to find their health and achieve their ideal body. You're also welcome to add yourself to the Facebook group in the link below. There you'll have access to the live videos that Eugene does weekly on Sundays, and other helpful content. Thank you again for tuning in.